and then everything turned to black. As if someone had shut all the lights. I hailed the driver, gave him the address, and stepped through the back door. I debated talking with the driver. "Went to the Palace of Fine Arts," the driver said when I asked about his weekend. "They were holding a guest gallery. My girl is a big Georgia O'Keeffe fan. Myself, I don't get all this new stuff. What's so hard about painting some wavy lines?" For the rest of the trip, we spoke about how the other artwork that had been on display, pieces from Charles Shearer, Louis Lozowick, Edward Steichen, and many more. I was sad to have missed it. But when we stopped at my destination, I left my envy in the taxi cab and refocused on the case at hand. The North Beach station was San Francisco PD headquarters, also poetically baptized the Hall of Justice. The building dominated the corner of Kearny and Washington in Chinatown, rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake. I thought it looked even more sour than it had before. I strode to the young bobbed girl behind a large oak desk. She must have been new, because we shared no recognition of one another. I asked for Shipman, and she motioned me to a chair as she pressed a pearl button. I sat down, and she disappeared through a frosted door. I rolled another cigarette to pass the time. Between puffs, I thought about my history at the department. I imagine the station captain would have been furious had I known I was there. I did, after all, break a tumbler with the help of another officer's temple. That had been my last day on the force. It wasn't long before Shipman walked out of the frosted door. Samuel Shipman smiled when he saw me. He had always been helpful to me in my days on the force. Working closely with Lewis, he'd acquired the habit of bouncing theories my way. He judged officers purely on results, and because of that, he was one of my few fans. We exchanged brief pleasantries before he said, "Wouldn't come here for glad handing." He had a habit of removing the subject from his sentences. "What needs doing?" I explained my case to him. He scoffed when I mentioned Connor Green. "Working for that pinhead? Got a good mind to run him up the flagpole." "I just need to know about this letter." I handed him the note Green had given me, and I explained its context. After looking it over, Shipman tried to stifle a laugh. "Complete bunk," he said. "See the symbol in the corner? Mark of the Black Hand Gang? Except Black Hand letters are always ransom letters, not threats. No foothold on this coast anyhow. Never been one in California." "So, the letters are fake?" Shipman nodded. "Someone trying to imitate the Black Hand." I grunted a sigh and noted what he'd said. "Don't know if Green is getting one over you," he said, "or if someone else is pulling Green's leg. But having more dirt on the man couldn't hurt, especially if he's your client." I agreed. I've been trying to dig through his past. Got any bunk on him? Shipman shook his head. "No. From Oakland is all I know, but I can do some more digging." I thanked him for that. "Under a pile of ice, though. Might take me a while. Why don't I telephone when I find something?" I had no office where I could receive messages, but I dreaded returning to the station. I told him to call Southern Coffee. "Just leave anything with Franklin Conway," I instructed. He said that was all right. We traded goodbyes, and I went back to the station's entrance. Now I knew the letter was fake, and Tiny Paul's wine had already shown me the Green's bootlegging scheme was bunk. I just had to wait for Shipman's call at Southern Coffee to get some dirt on Green. Okay, I guess we're going to Southern Coffee. Shipman said he'd call Southern Coffee if he found any dirt on Green. I could go see if I had any messages. Of course, if I was stuck on the case, a stiff drink with Frankie could give me some hint as well. I flagged a taxi cab and was on my way. I thought about chatting with the driver to pass the time. The driver was an economics student at Stanford, working to pay his room and board. He was an enthusiastic talker, the type of student who had yet to discover that he was not the foremost expert on any topic, and he disseminated European politics as though he were preaching unquestionable gospel. I indulged him and listened a while. "You see," he said with a proud grin, "France and England will be fine. They're going through the same resurgence that's happening here. The war has only made them stronger." I asked about Germany. "Oh, the filthy hunt," he snorted. "Why should we care about them? Chancellor Marx puts out a statement asking us to take away all our sanctions. Hell, if he wanted a fair shake, he shouldn't have started a damn war." I agreed. Fritz has plenty of room to spur his economy while still paying us back for our wartime losses. The driver grinned as we stopped. He turned and smiled. "You're all right, miss." I nodded and exited the taxi cab. Frankie was still behind the bar. I wondered if Shipman had left any messages for me. Of course, if I was stuck on the case, a long drink with him might be helpful. I looked at Frankie. "What's eating you, kid?" he asked. I sat on my regular stool and rapped my knuckles at the bar. "Any messages, Frankie?" I asked him. "What do you mean by that?" "Well, I told Sam Shipman, an old contact on the force, to leave any dirt with you if he found it." Frankie laughed. "So now I'm your bartender and your secretary. Say, if I become your housemate, will you at least pay me?" "So I'm guessing you haven't heard anything," I said. "Nothing yet, Miss Chief." Frankie chuckled. "Shipman's supposed to call you about Green? What do you got so far?" "Well, you'll like this," I told him. "Remember that wine you offered me?" "Oh, my Zinfandel you nearly finished." "Where did you say that grape was from?" "It's from here, California. Napa or Sonoma." "You sure?" "Yes, Malone. It's the only place those grapes grow nowadays." "And not Canada?" I asked. "What are you swinging at, Malone?" Tiny Paul had a bottle of wine that tasted the exact same. That identical spice. He said it was from Green's bootlegging source. From Vancouver. "Malone, I'm telling you," he said. "No wine anywhere here in the world has that spice. It ain't from Vancouver, and Green ain't getting it cheap." I nodded. "Well, you just confirmed my hunch. Green's got no source. He must be swindling Tiny Paul and the entire ferry gang, and I bet he'll run away with their money." Frankie let out a long whistle in disbelief. Just then, the phone rang. Frankie picked it up with a, "Hello?" "Right," then handed me the receiver saying, "Shipman." "PC," he said, his excited voice cackling the speaker. "Find anything on Green?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. I was puzzled. "That's the idea. First got pinched for a brawl in the ferry building. That was in November 1920. Before that, no Connor Green anywhere around the bay. Strange," he continued, "has trouble staying out of a mess, mixed up in something nearly every week. So only appearing a few years ago? That Oakland backstory is Swiss cheese." "What are you thinking? Green's got a different past?" I asked. "Uh-huh," he said. "Guess that he just got here in 1920 and never been straight about where he's from." "Wait," I said. "If Connor Green was a criminal in another town, easily some cop would recognize the name and send him back home. SFPD isn't that thick." "Right," Shipman agreed. "If it's the same name. Could be his real identity disappeared in another town." I thought aloud. So, he might have changed lives. Is there any way to confirm that? If Green fled, the local bulls will keep looking for him. But not if they thought he died. Get these cases somewhere where mobsters fake a death to escape a burg. Use a mangled stiff to do it. Someone unrecognizable. That way they get out of the town without a chase. Got any mobster deaths in 1920? I asked. A ton. Too many to look through. But narrow the search for me. A town he might be from. I could check a specific city's archive. Anything in your notes that tells me where he could be from. I found some tickets to St. Louis in the Green's apartment, I told him. The missus was ruffled when I picked them up. I stayed on the telephone while Shipman used another line to call his contact at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I was nursing a glass of gin when he got back to me. Lucky break, PC. Seems there's one that fits the bill. He read aloud an article from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch dated October 8, 1920. Gun battle at June's Diner, gangster dead. Suspected bandit clubhouse scene of another shooting. A heated argument turned deadly Thursday as multiple shots ran inside June's Diner on 14th Street. Suspect hideout of Egan Rats. A man was found dead at the scene, unidentified due to a shotgun wound to his face. Police suspected he is mobster Breg, the jester, who hired a private eye to investigate threats on his life. Last month, Chief of Police Brannon said investigating gangster on gangster deaths was a waste of time, and the discovery of the threats leads many to believe police won't look further into the case. Hold on, I said. This Breg character had hired a private detective. Seems police are quick to forget a case. They've got a reason to think it's just gangster violence. This lines up with Green, I said. Gets better. Breg's first name? Connor. I cursed loudly through the telephone. I continued with my theory. And your story says that Breg was deeply indebted. So maybe Green's just waiting in San Francisco until he's got enough dough to skip town and go home. He have some bootlegging business? Shipman asked. Why would he leave that behind? No, I shook my head. His wine is complete bunk. It's local stuff, not any Canadian route he might be claiming. I didn't know why he'd fall past one until now. Returning Breg to St. Louis could be huge. Swing by the station, we'll iron it all out. I agreed and slammed the receiver on its pegs. It seemed I needed to make my way back to the station. So, what's the news on Green? Frankie asked as I was headed up the stairs. Now it seemed like I had all the details. I summarised it up for him. So, the total wrap. Green isn't really Green at all. He's Breg, the jester, a former member of Egan's Rats from St. Louis. He's Breg? Frankie was shocked. But he's been here a while, Malone. Sure, I said, but only since 1920. He couldn't pay off his debts in Missouri, so he faked his death and moved to San Francisco. He's been longing to go back, but he needs a way to settle his score before he can show his face again. Is that where his bootlegging comes in? Frankie asked. Uh-huh. Green set up a sham running business. Green set up a sham running scheme. He brought local wine, but claimed to get it at lower prices from Canada. He convinced Tiny Paul to front him a heap of cash for it. Instead of providing the wine, he's planning to skip town with Paul's money, disappearing to St. Louis with enough dough to pay back his debts. He already faked his death once, so he'll do it again here? Frankie asked. That's right. His plan is similar to his last one. Hire a detective claiming he's scared for his life, fake his death, then know the police won't bother with underground violence. Frankie looked at me with a blank stare. Seems like all the pieces fit, he said. So he just hired you as a cover. I sighed. Seems like it. Don't worry about that, Frankie started saying, but I cut him off. I'm going to see Shipman now. I'll sweep away this mess and come back and see you. Have a stiff drink ready, I instructed. Just be careful, Malone. Egan's Rats have a reputation. They can be ruthless. I turned and walked up the stairs. There was only one place to go. Green had hired me for cover so that he could blow town. Shipman held the final evidence to sink that plan. I needed to get to the station. I stepped into the taxi cab and was consumed with my own thoughts about the case. I'd finally caught a break, but it was a dud. I hadn't realised it, but I'd been revelling in real detective work. Once I learned it was all bunk, my mind reverted to its incessant nagging. I wondered if I was just a puppet to some two-bit mobster. I was hardly bringing much justice to anybody, which made me unsure of what exactly it was that I was doing. I supposed I was wasting my time. It all came back to the same basic premise. You're failing, my inner voice said. I began to feel nauseous in the car. My mind repeated its last thought. You are failing. And then everything turned to black, as if someone had shut all the lights. My naked arms faded into view. They emitted a soft white glow. I rubbed my eyes, willing them to focus, but without success. Between my fingers, it appeared in the distance. I could hardly see, but as the object billowed, a clarity came to me. Then I understood what it was. Lewis's grey coat. I floated towards it. I reached to grab the coat, which was when I saw the needles. No, not needles. Glass, shards falling all around me. One piece wedged itself deep in my right elbow. I grimaced, but I was unable to make any noise or movements. But then, as suddenly as the rain had started, it stopped. I looked upward with caution, wary of the rain's return. But above me, I saw the grey coat. It was no longer billowing. It was rigid, a shield against the terrible rain. It started falling, slowly at first, but quickly it gained speed. It came upon me and enveloped me completely. It was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I let out a gasp. And then, the light. It pierced my eye sockets, hitting the back of my skull like a hammer on an anvil. I directed all my energy into my lungs and forced out a yell. That helped. Everything became quiet. I could breathe deeply. I noticed someone beside me. He gradually came into focus. Shipman showed his teeth in a big smile. I looked up at him from my laying position on the Murphy bed. He swung his leg over a chair and sat beside me. Thought you'd never come around, he said. I tried to ask him something, but another bolt of pain raced up my elbow. All I managed was a groan. Relax, PC. Just a few scratches. Quite the auto crash. Flew straight through the front window. They took out large piece of glass from your right arm. I remembered none of that. I mumbled the words auto crash to myself. I wondered how bad the accident must have been. Shipman removed a flask from his pocket, unscrewed the top and handed it to me. Not the best hooch, but might get rid of that banging in your head. I took a swig. I closed my eyes and sighed a deep breath as its warmth burned down my throat. I know modern medicine doubts it, but that gulp of moonshine helped. I went to give the flask back to Shipman, but he put out a hand to stop me. Hang on to it. Might need another swig after what I'm about to tell you. I propped myself up on my left shoulder to listen. About Green's case. The two of us figured he was going to fake his own death. Shipman clicked his tongue to his teeth and looked towards the floor. That ain't happening. Last night, Connor Green was shot through the heart twice. What? I shouted. The exclamation was impulsive, I swung my legs quickly around and sat on the edge of the bed. My headache had suddenly vanished. "Whoa there," Shipman said. "Look, been here with you all night," he added quickly. "In that chair beside the bed. Just telephoned the station to check in, and that's the rap they gave me. Told them what I'd known from you, and they said they'd chase it up." "How do you know it was him?" Another involuntary question. I was running on instinct. "PC, faking your death involves a mangled body. Shot through the chest. His face is still intact. Whatever Green was planning on doing, he didn't get that far. And we looked it up. He doesn't have a twin. That would be too easy." Shipman grinned. "Green hired you from this case," he continued. "Gives you every right to follow it up if you want. That said, he was likely taking you for a ride. Wouldn't blame you if you want to drop it. But I'd like your help, PC. You know the case. Could use your head, even if it's been a little bumped. Once you're feeling better, I'll be at the station. Come find me there." Shipman stood up and cracked his back. "Maybe I'll catch some shut-eye on top of my deaths too. Sure beats that chair you got." He turned and walked out. I stood up from the creaking bed and surveyed the cluttered apartment. The cat slept at the foot of the bed. I scratched behind his ear, and he seemed to like that. I stared at the doorway and took a deep breath. I supposed I owed Shipman enough to help solve the case, even if Green had given me the runaround. After all, what type of detective would leave a case half solved? Although Green had just been using me, his life had apparently been in danger all along. I resolved to find his killer. I headed to the North Beach station for any information Shipman could give me before starting the chase. I waved down a taxi cab and was on my way. I thought I might talk with the driver to pass the time. We talked about politics, but I don't remember exactly what about. Not all conversations with cab drivers were memorable. The headquarters building dominated the corner of Kearny and Washington in Chinatown, rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake. I thought it looked even more sour than it had before. I stepped out of the taxi cab and walked through the station doors, ready to chase any leads on Green. But standing in front of me as I entered, bawling her eyes from their sockets, was Mrs. Green. She saw me and brought her wailing closer. "Malone!" She exhaled through her sobbing. "You're working for my husband. What happened?" Her breathing obscured her next sentences, but I got the general idea. I told her I knew as little about the matter as she did, but that I was looking into it, and I was sure the officers were doing their best. She begged me to help them, again drowning most of her sentence with her sobbing. I promised I would try. She took a slow inhale, raised her chest, and walked out of the station. When she was out of sight, Fred Grant came round the corner and let out a snort. Grant was another investigator for the SFPD. I noted his wispy hair, more grey and thin than I'd seen it last. A cigar often poked through his mouth, hardening his jaw and twisting his face into a scowl. I suppose that was an inappropriate look for a man who enjoyed the sinister parts of police work. I wondered if he still took his bribes in liquid form. Grant had never been a supporter of police women, and he was no fan of mine. He lighted the cigar and said, "The widow seems pretty torn up about him. You're really helping her out." It wasn't his place to know, so I just stared at him. "Well, all right. If you ain't gonna talk, then I should be on my way. Last thing I gotta do is head into the tin spoon and toss this in the freezer." That meant he was about to close the case cold. He smiled, as though he was glad to do it. I raised a questioning brow. "You aren't chasing it up?" I asked. He looked appalled that I would even ask. "We got more to deal with than some gangster. The captain don't care about crap like this, so long as it's not spreading too far." "And what about the girl?" "What does she expect?" he asked. "This broad goes and marries an Irishman. Probably killed by one of his own, or some dago. All those bums run together." I gave him a frown, to which he responded, "Look, if the missus wants you on this, that's her gamble. But I ain't gonna lead you nowhere, and don't expect support from the boys." "Not even if I find Green's killer?" He laughed. "If you get a confession, we'll cop 'em. Not something the DA can thumb his nose at either. They got to admit 3 things. Means, how they killed Green. Opportunity, when they did it. Motivation, why they'd bother. You do that, then sure, we'll be right behind you. But there ain't nobody here looking into it, I promise." He pulled on a cap and walked out. I held a glare in Grant's direction, and I was still fuming as I turned down the hallway towards Shipman's office. Shipman was frowning at the stacks of paper atop his desk, but he stood up and smiled when he saw me. "Glad you made it." I vented about Grant. Shipman shook his head. "Ain't wrong, you know. I must have scowled a mean look with him, because he was quick to follow with, 'Not that the case is dead, PC, but Captain has nobody on it. Even Grant's coming off as soon as he can. We're underwater with other bunk." "So, you have nothing for me?" "Not true. Department still did the regular foxtrot." He tossed me a beige folder. Inside was a large black and white photograph of Green's face, muscles relaxed and eyes closed. It looked almost normal, apart from his flattened hat behind his head and the dirt and grass behind that. The report behind the picture noted 3 important clues. First, that Green died at midnight the previous night. I cursed myself that I'd been so close to stopping it. Second, that Green was killed with 2 .45 caliber bullets to the chest. Those slugs weren't from a pea shooter. Green was killed by a mean gun. Finally, that Green was found this morning lying in Washington Square Park. That was only a block away from the Tin Spoon. I noted each of those facts and gave the folder back to Shipman. "All we got," Shipman said, laying the folder back down on his desk. "Can pitch the gunman if you can prove the case, but you got to solve it without much support." "Don't have time to help either," he sighed. "No point coming back here until you got your man." "I never had much support from the department anyhow." "Well," Shipman sighed, "at least I'm here for you. But listen, we need a confession on this one. Captain doesn't want to run around." "Right. Grant mentioned they'd have to admit to how, why, and when they killed Green." "That's it. Prove that, we'll pick 'em up," he said. "Never been on a murder before, right? Can get tense. Just know, if you accuse someone but can't prove everything, they'll turn like a switch. Might like you one minute, but hate you the next. Chatting with folks is your easiest route to more information, but won't get any banter after you accuse someone of murder. So be careful who you accuse. Could make your case harder if you go the wrong way." "Alright, I get it," I said, and I internalized it. "And remember," Shipman concluded, "plenty of lies out there. You can contradict means, motives, or opportunity with anything in your notes." I thanked him and walked out of his office. I stood outside the police station and went over the mantra. I had to prove means, motive, and opportunity for anyone I suspected of the murder. Once I found all 3 for a single person, I'd have them licked. I started out to begin the chase. Some things on stream So many dumb things on the street. Dumb things.